Hey everybody. With Season 38 of ESEA Main already underway, with it comes a new edition of the ever-controversial Main Preview. I'm NoVa, and I'll be your guide through the hectic season we have ahead of us. I know many of you were disappointed that there were no videos coming out during Season 37, as I was playing Advanced last season, and fell out of touch with the new talent that had risen in the time I was gone. I didn't feel comfortable making a video on teams I had no knowledge of and presenting it in a manner as though I did. This season, I've both come back down to main and I've brushed back up on my NA main knowledge, all in an effort to bring a solid video worth the extended wait. ESCA was never one to make my job easy, however, as between the website locking me out dozens of times while I was doing research and this season having a never before seen 48 team playoff, I had my work cut out for me. With the pool of playoff teams being extended 33%, there are now a lot more teams I'll need to talk about in this video. As with last time, I'll be going more in depth the later we go, but I'll mention every team I've predicted to make playoffs at least briefly, attempting to highlight a key player to watch as well as their path into this season of main. The full ranking spreadsheet will be available alongside this video, so feel free to go on my Twitter at Nova__FPS to check that out, and drop a follow while you're there if you want to keep up with more of my content or follow my own path through ESCA. One last thing before we start. These rankings are my own opinions. I try to put a lot of work into tuning the rankings, but in the end there's 131 teams to dissect, and I will be wrong about some of it. If you aren't happy with your placement, I'll be happy if you prove me wrong. And as one more aside, TFDYJSTM didn't have enough players paid when I began the rankings, so in an effort to get this video out, I decided not to rank them. The players on that team are obviously really good, however, so make your own judgments. Without further ado though, let's get into the rankings, starting with my bottom playoff team. The first team I'd like to discuss is Atyra, bottoming out my top 48. The lowest of 6 open move-ups I have in my top 48, Atyra came into this season off the back of a 5-1 open playoffs run. Glory's team qualified for main before dropping a map in playoffs, but once they passed that threshold, they barely outlasted Filthy Casual, previously known as Palma Boys Social Club, in a 3-map series, before falling in their very next series, also in 3 maps, to the eventual winners of Open, Paper Plains. Since Season 37, they've swapped out a few players, opting to recruit both Tor and Based for this season. But if last season is anything to go off of, Glory is going to be Atyra's player to watch. They've already suffered a tough loss to Team Exodus thus far, but if they can bounce back from that, I think playoffs are still in the cards. Team number 47 is OurSavedSouls, with a very different roster from their 8-8 run in main last season. Joining Axe and Reza are Zeller, CJ, and Kratos, all sporting different backgrounds in intermediate and main. This team is off to a stellar start as compared to Atyra, but this is a team I think will start strong and then struggle later down the line as more fierce competition steps up to the plate. Their early wins may be enough to push them into playoffs, but from there, it will be on the veteran main players of the roster, CJ, Axe, and my personal player to watch for this team, Reza, to push them further, being that they have the most main experience in the team. Next up is another team that's no stranger to main, Resurgence Esports. Clocking in 2 consecutive 9-7 seasons, I think the guys are ready to make the step into playoffs. Taking a cursory look at their upcoming match schedule, they have one of the easiest sets of 8 matches I've seen in the entire division, which should definitely lend Summer and his team a helping hand towards breaching the equivalent of a 9-win barrier in a 14-game season. This is a team that, on paper, should do quite well, but I do feel they're lacking the firepower to contest some of the strongest teams in main, which is why, although I do think they'll make playoffs, I don't see them making advanced. My player to watch for this team would be Hunter. And one more note, they did happen to play at the Denver LAN, and they had some pretty decent results there. I don't know if they'll be able to carry that into the online season, but I'm very curious to see how it plays out. One of the 16 teams who got to compete at the first LAN back in NA, Captai's Ohio Meat Wagon, comes in at 45 on my list. Although they didn't win a single map in East Falls, they did manage to put up 9 rounds against Yenicherry and have a familiar face from previous main playoffs in Captai, though it is the least experienced player, Joshi, that has been fragging out in their first 3 games. The 1-1 intermediate playoffs team has already faced some early losses to teams they definitely should have beaten, but the easier schedule that will be afforded to them because of this should allow them to cruise to playoffs at best, though not much further than that. As of writing this, my 44th ranked team Continuum has yet to play a game this season, but with Davenport University slated as their first match, I unfortunately don't expect this team to get off to the 1-0 start that I'm sure they would love. Is what I would have said had they not upset a team that we won't see until very late into this video. I promised myself I would leave the rankings as they are, regardless of any new results from days after I began writing the script, otherwise this video would never see the public. But I have to give credit where credit is due. Continuum has essentially proved what I believe to be the theme of this season. Main Season 38 is wide open. Funnily enough, Continuum improved their worth to me after their 4-1 IM playoffs run ended with one of the closest attempts at uncharted territory, the eventual IM winners, Life, in Season 37, with a 16-13, 16-12 set of losses. And when you factor in the addition of long-standing main player Infinite, they can probably reach higher highs than even before. This is a team I still expect to cap out around playoffs, with mainly Owl's individual performance, in addition to something else I'll discuss later, leading to Davenport's demise, but I feel comfortable calling them a dark horse for this season to try to at least get a few playoff wins. Obviously, Owl, with his 130 80-yard debut match, is my player to watch. I'm going to try to be brief with this one. BusaBOSS was one of the toughest teams to rank. They currently have 8 players paid this season, of which all 8 have played in matches. Strangely enough, this is nothing new for them, as the 8-man roster is simply carrying over from last season, where they managed to make main playoffs before bombing out. I don't have a player to watch because I don't know who'll be playing, but congrats to the group for paving the way for 8-man rosters. I have them making playoffs because they kept the same core of 8 players as the playoff team last season, but this season of main is, to be frank, pretty weak. But this may be the end of 8-man rosters as we know it. Only time will tell. As of yet, undefeated team Astronomical Pain version 5 is my 42nd place team this season. After having gone 8-8 last season in main and lacking any obvious super fraggers, I was ready to write them out of playoffs entirely, but they're off to a great start so far, dropping 16 rounds total in 2 matches, albeit versus weaker competition. I do think they will be able to find the remaining 7 wins required to make playoffs, at least if 102 ADR superstar Bats Pete has anything to say about it. Their true first test will come on the 18th when they face off against Kinship Black. Until then, I can't put them any higher than bottom playoffs. One more note about this team, obviously, they're not undefeated anymore, but that's what happens when you rank live. The second of 6 open move-up representatives I have making playoffs is the 4th place open side, Team Clarity, who have yet to play a match this season. This is a team that I, admittedly, could probably have ranked higher. Open is hard to judge, and although I'm definitely rooting for my old teammate Sasha to make it further than I predict, there are not many quality matches they played in Open to work off of. One game of note is their eventual loss to the winners of Open, Paper Plains, where Clarity pushed them to a 3rd map. This isn't something exclusive to Clarity, but is food for thought, for sure. Their stat board seemed pretty even and open, with only Zukar really pushing ahead of the pack. They do play my team first this season, so I'm going to shut up about this team until after that. Rynos Ranch comes in at 40. Despite the namesake of the team being Rhino, I'm most interested to see how Randy performs on this team. They had a really unfortunate set of draws to start out the season, pulling both New School Originals and D-Man, and lost accordingly, but I think that the experience on the team is enough, assuming they're actually practicing and taking it seriously, to make playoffs in this one of the weaker seasons, allowing more teams into playoffs than usual. I do expect them to start winning games from here and outperforming their 7-9 record from last season. As of my writing this, but after I locked in my rankings, NeverBrokeAgain is looking for a player after having lost their first 2 games of the season. I stand by their placement as number 39 on my list here, because the talent is definitely evident on this previous main playoff team, but it's on them to start rebuilding and finding a new fit that fits. They also must recognize that their losses came at the hands of some genuinely good teams, and that they can still bounce back with the weaker teams they'll have coming up. My former teammate of 3 games, Winter, would be my player to watch here, sporting 90 ADR over their 2 losses and advanced experience. It makes me very happy to finally include a team that has never really found success in main over the past 7 seasons. Last picks are my 38th pick this time around. Their early results have a lot of positives to them, taking 13 rounds off Impossible and 14 off of Revel, but their schedule is definitely not working in their favor, with MTU and others still on the horizon. With just a bit more push from the players around him, Lord of Pies could finally make main playoffs. Bob Leponge falls in almost the exact same boat as last picks just before them, as another team that has been struggling to pull it together enough for a playoff run. Fearless Beetle got the closest he's ever been with this core last season after going 9-7, but with the expanded playoff pool, I do think he'll be returning to main playoffs for the first time since season 32. With the addition of Shepard and Anxiety, I'm very curious to see how they'll perform. Their first match is on the 18th versus Strictly Business. Let's see how they do. Thanks to the gift of recording this script much later than I recorded it, I can answer that question myself. They didn't do too hot. I do still think this team's going to bounce back from their 0-2 record, though. Chess Club comes in at 36th place, with a current record of 2-1 under their belt. The team, led by Guy, went 3-1 in IM playoffs, with their loss coming at the hands of UGK Esports, the second-placed IM team last season, in 3 maps. They've already had some really interesting games, with clean wins where they were due, and an exceptionally close game against West Coast Pizza Rats, who we'll discuss later. I'm personally most interested in Migi on this team, so he would be my player to watch for them. Their next big test comes in around a week when they face off against DU. The third of 6 open teams in the list, Metins Mangos are where they are for 2 reasons. The first is a streak of 3 wins to kick off the season to some very decent competition. The second is Coco. Anyone who's ever played a puck against this guy knows that if he can carry it over to League, it's going to be scary, and so far he has. Also, my old teammate Lath is on this team, so hey to him. They have a pretty mixed schedule, and I don't expect them to continue to be flawless, but Coco is definitely a force to be reckoned with. In the 34th spot, I was going to talk about Vlonely, but instead of the script that I ended up writing, I'm just going to say this. Apparently, there was some controversy around one of the players on the team, Atlas. I'm not entirely sure what it was. Looking at their schedule as it stands now, they've lost 16-14 to 3 separate teams and lost 16-13 to another one, and their only win came as a forfeit win over Stealth Esports. I don't expect much from this team. I don't think they should be 34th. I guess just treat it like everyone got bumped up a spot? I'm not really sure. The current second place team in the division, an undefeated 4-0 team, Life Game, comes in right before the top 32, at 33rd place on my list. Admittedly, I didn't expect them to do this hot out the gate, but they haven't had to play any teams on this list yet, at least, so I would like to see them play a team with a bit more muscle behind them before judging this 4-0 start. As we all know, going 4-0 to start an ESEA season is one of the hardest paths to making playoffs if the team isn't worth their salt. So let's see if Life Game can continue their winning ways. Cheetah's averaging over 100 ADR in their past 4 games, but one just with 8 clutches under his belt already catches my eye as well, making him my player to watch for this team. We've reached the top 32 with a particularly peculiar team filling the titular spot. Loto Gaming is off to an absolutely abysmal start, going 1-3 in their first 4. As one of the few teams in the division coming in with a win in main playoffs, I expected much more out of them. But as 2 of these losses come to teams ranked above them, I can understand their trouble closing them out. The test for Medusa and co now is how well their mental game is. ESEA, in some ways, rewards losing early, so if the team can stick together, keep the blinders up and focus on one game at a time, I could still see them reaching playoffs and taking a few maps.
The 31st team, BloodLine, is a team I didn't even think I would get to place in my top 48 despite their playoff appearance last season, as they hadn't had a 5th until very recently. Fortunately, they made it in before the deadline and are now off to a 2-0 start, including a forfeit win. The roster on paper is really strong, with a lot of high firepower players such as Noobless and Fire. I'm really interested in how their match on the 17th will go against Spooky Squad, although I suppose all of you watching will already know the eventual result. These guys can go deep, but the reason they are where they are is the last-minutedness of their 5th acquisition. They should be fine though, as long as they don't stumble early on.
Rounding out the 30s is ROOMBAPEEK, who managed to reset their early loss and are now 1-1. Having gone 8-8 last season, it is questionable whether they can buck that and push it further this go around. If Nick and Turns can keep up their form from last season into this one, then the practice they've been putting in should see them making it to main playoffs this season. Injury is my player to watch, especially on the 17th when they face off versus Kinship Black. Welcoming us into the 20s is UGK Esports, who are coming off of a second place result in IM, losing to uncharted territory in a 2-mapper. Still, they beat a lot of eventual main teams in their road to that second place, with Dreza standing out most last season, opping his way to 90 ADR. This season, it looks so far like Bob is rising to the occasion himself, with a 100 ADR season opener. I think this team has a lot going for them, as morale should be very high, and I'm fairly certain they've kept the same 5 as last season, meaning they already have a lot more together than a lot of the main teams. I don't see them replicating another second place run, but playoffs for their first season of main as a 5 is definitely nothing to scoff at, if they can get there, that is. Although this team isn't quite living up to the standard their name sets, best team in main's 28th spot comes as recognition of the big pros their team brings to the table. They narrowly missed out on playoffs last season, going 10-6, but kept 4 of the same 5 players and went back to the drawing board for this season. A loss to all gas, no breaks is nothing to be ashamed of, and their win over Cerberus shows a lot of promise as well. This team's win conditions are rum gone, as well as the new man Eddie's, and what he can provide to push Zach's squad to the next level. A staple of Maine at this point, Buck Nasty finally caught their break in the division after going 2-1 in playoffs last season, which is why they find themselves in 27th this time on my list. Heartless and Ryzo tend to shoot back the most on this team, and are returning once again this season for the squad, with 2 wins and a loss under their belt so far. They're off to a good start. More telling, however, is that one of their 2 wins came from a forfeit, and the other over a team who did not even place on this list. I can't see them making advance just yet, as I still feel like their team is missing something, but I know at the very least that Heartless deserves a shot at playoffs once more. The first advanced relegation team on the list, although only 3 players on the team actually have advanced XP, in Trigger, Loki, and Panic, Tracksuit Gaming find themselves both in a solid spot on this list at 26, as well as in the season overall at 3 and 1. There are definite firepower question marks that prevent me from putting them too much higher than this, but Trigger at least is coming in hot, with almost 180R already under his belt. This team's win condition falls on the others, especially Slug and Panic, to make sure they can provide the necessary support, on or off the scoreboard, to keep the wins going. If their win over Impossible says anything, though, it's that they're more than capable of taking down some of the bigger names in this division. Speaking of bigger names in the division, Davey is gracing us with his presence in Maine for Season 38, joining up with his friends under his ORGPeeker's advantage. I don't need to say anything about Davey because he's already done the talking for me with his consistently solid performance map after map. It hasn't always been enough, however, as despite his stable fragging power, the team has already suffered very close losses to CHAWTY as well as Sexy Black Timberlake. I do hope Davey doesn't have to drag his teammates too hard, but I think playing with him this season will elevate every player on the team to new heights. Who knows? By the end of the season, Tawa may even average 90 ADR. The first of 2 Emergence squads, Emergence Black comes in at 24th place in the rankings after a 1-2 playoff run last season. I'm already impressed with how closely they've competed with Rectify Academy, pushing them to all 30 rounds, and they've bounced back to a positive record quite quickly. Their schedule is pretty forgiving early before ramping up in a few weeks, but this team is definitely capable of turning some heads. Rozzy is definitely the player to watch for this team, with 63 frags over their 2 non-forfeit win games, as well as a great showing last season. Spooky Squad is not a team that was on my radar at all prior, but after a lot of vouches and seeing their work in person when they tied Verum at East Fallsland and got 12 rounds off of MetaHash, known as Idiots at the event, I was sold on the story I was hearing. These guys have genuine upset potential despite their less than stellar 7-9 record last season. I want to say my player to watch is Carson, since he's a former teammate of mine, but I don't have a particular player in mind for this team. I think that their teamwork and mentality after such a sharp performance on LAN will carry them in a big way through the online season. Another team with a very unfortunate first matchup, the 22nd ranked Conquest was forced to fight against D-Man Esports right out the gate, and although they put up an impressive fight, they now find themselves at an 0-1 record to start out the season. This team has a very good chance of making advanced on paper, and I would consider them a lock for playoffs as well. They were another 10-6 team that slightly missed out on playoffs last season, but with an upgraded roster including Lion and Izune, they'll definitely top that this season. Those two would also be my players to watch, as Lion brings a lot of explosive firepower, and Izune is just a fundamentally good player all around. Speaking from the future here, Conquest Esports has already managed to reset their 0-1 start, and are 3-1, looking confident into the remainder of the season. My 21st ranked team, CHAWTY, is yet another team that slipped through my own analysis of the season, but was hyped up time and time again as being genuine contenders. They've already proven that they're worth the hype, taking down both NeverBrokeAgain and Peeker's advantage in their first 2 games, and with much easier teams on the horizon, they'll probably be undefeated for a while. R2D2J is coming into the season with a vengeance for barely missing playoffs last season, already putting up 96 ADR, but his teammates are definitely not slouching too far behind either. A team who I felt should have made advance the last go around, East Coast Gaming, comes just shy of the teens in the 20th spot. Their final map of Maine last season saw them losing 25-22 to current advanced team Carbonex. I also just noticed while scripting this that they're off to the worst start of any team in this whole list, already sitting at 1-4. Hornet and Chewy are my players to watch for this roster, but it seems like despite their best efforts, they aren't able to close against a wide variety of opposition. I do think that with the experience and longevity of this roster, they should be able to bounce back and still make playoffs. But with only 14 games this season, they're running out of time to turn this ship around. They're certainly not living up to the standards I had set for them before matches began, but that's the trouble with ranking at the same time as matches are being played. Sometimes it helps inform your decisions, but other times you look like an idiot. Let's see how much of an idiot ECG makes me look by the end of the season. The fourth of 6 open teams in this list, Ocean Loves Anime won the 4 games required to make Maine before losing to the winners of Open in close fashion. I can't vouch whether Ocean really does love anime, but I can vouch that the team itself is off to one hell of a start, as at the time of writing this, they're in first place in Maine. I don't know who Fluctuation is on his main account, but whoever he is, he's having a great time in Maine so far, with over 106 ADR over 4 games against a mix of good and not so good teams. If not for this unknown legend, I would have had Ellis as my player to watch, as someone who's always found moderate to good success individually in main. This team has to face up against DU in about a week, but until then, I have a few more favorable matches to watch from them, so I expect that they'll continue to reign as number one for at least another week or two. Off to one of the best starts he's ever had in main, Jackro and his band of revelers on Revel come in at 18th spot on this list. They definitely have the pieces in place to make advanced, with, in my opinion, one of the strongest players in the entire division, Reaper, as well as one of my highest ceiling players, Emblem, on their team. I'm sure that there are some out there who may call me out for bias, but I'll be straight here. These guys are my friends. I want them to succeed. But looking at it objectively, they put in the work and have a lot of drive. The difference from the past is that this time they have the gunmanship to back it up. You can quote me on this if you want. They may have gone 8-8 last season, but Revel is making playoffs. Please withhold judgment until then. HalfBliss is another team with a lot of vouches, but I have some first-hand knowledge to back it up this time. They come in at 17th for a few reasons. They have a pretty solid mix of experienced players and young, hungry fraggers. Surge and Sean are the more experienced players on the roster and provide a lot of knowledge and support for the younger players in Python, who has one of the highest work ethics I've seen for someone of his age, and Gavin, who I think is the youngest player in main this season, correct me if I'm wrong, and is my definition for a diamond in the rough. After having played with this team for a few weeks, I can say there is definitely a lot of diamond in the rough about the roster as a whole, but Masami Duck is a great leader, and they've already shown strides, only dropping 11 rounds in their first two games. I want to say these guys are a dark horse for the season, but I need to see them play against stronger competition before I can make any larger claims. Unfortunately, we'll be waiting for quite some time. But their schedule is very favorable, pushing me even more towards thinking they'll enter playoffs with a solid seed and have a half decent chance of taking one of the 16 advanced spots. Finally, we've reached the teams I think will find their spots in the top 16 this season. I find this next team, the fifth of six open teams who made my top 48, Filthy Casual, to have a really high ceiling, speaking purely of their aim. They find their number 16 spot due in large part to housing one of the best aimers in the entire division, Sergeant Hash, but the rest of the team are no strangers to deep runs in main playoffs. So why are they 16th and no higher, despite having a 132 ADR monster on their team? Well, I do think this team will cruise through a lot of the less practiced teams. Pugging out the season and relying on aim can only get you so far. If there's one trend I've noticed over the past many main seasons, it's that the hardcore Pug or Smurf teams always seem to just peter out right before making advanced. If this team practices, puts in the work, and doesn't draw too many other top 16 teams on their way to playoffs, I could see them contesting for a top 8 spot overall this season. A very unexpected deep entry into this list is Flashy, a previous 6 and 10 main team that finds their place at 15. This team, led on the scoreboard by new pickup Magic, is off to a quick 4-0 start this season, taking down some pretty decent competition. They've also already played and won on Ancient 3 times, which I'm interpreting as a sign of a deep map pool. Another big thing propping Flashy up this high is the relatively enviable schedule, not having to play any too solid teams until they face off against Filthy Casual in a few weeks. I'm looking forward to that game as a test for Flashy to see whether this team really has it in them to make it far in this season, or if they're just a flash in the pan. One of the more experienced rosters in main this season, the core of Cerberus has been together for quite a while, without finding too much success in main despite having ex-Big Chillin' Opera Squidda on board. This season, the teams opted to switch things up and recruit former advanced duo LTC and Hansen from Aura Gaming to help them reach the next level. They aren't off to the hottest of starts so far, but the consistent fragging force from Squidda, supported by the rest of the team, and the wealth of experience they have in their arsenal should be a recipe for success this time around. Taking a win in main playoffs last season before falling to Redux Rising and Impossible in quick succession, Kinship Black is coming into the season with a retained core of Average, Garfield, and Livid, and have rendezvoused with Kyle and Rezion to try to break the one-game playoff win barrier and make advanced. They too are off to a rapid 3-0 start, with one in-progress match against ROOMBAPEEK, which is set to be resumed from 13 to 9 in Kinship Black's favor in a few weeks. This team has quite a few players performing for them, and after keeping a similar roster that found success last season, I expect them to do even better this time. Garfield would be my player to watch for this team, with the rifler looking to follow up his 100 plus ADR season 37 with an even better season 38, which he certainly is on track to do. The number 12 team on my list this time around is New School Originals, although I would argue they aren't as original as they might expect, considering they're the second team in a row that's currently 4-0 that retained a core 3 players and lost 1-2 in playoffs last season. So what changed with this team then? For starters, they've opted to pick up former Ad Astra player Sensor, as well as the previous Valkyrie opera Ciandor. Wade and the other members of the core lost to the boys early on in main playoffs, but after a lower bracket win against BloodLine, they ended up falling short against X Life Through Gaming in 2 maps. This team doesn't have a current standout player, but knowing how Sensor has done in the past, I want to see what kind of numbers he can put up in main this season, making him my player to watch. The highest ranking advanced relegation roster in this season, Team Hyperrr falls just short of my top 10 after having fallen short of retaining their spot in advanced last season, ending up 5-11. This season so far, they're facing some pretty mixed results, and are currently sitting at a 3-2 record. They're placed this high for a few reasons. For starters, they managed to retain all 5 of their players from last season into this one. That's always a good sign, as it means they've had to waste much less time on getting set up for the season, and can focus much more on expanding upon what they already had. Secondly, they're the only advanced relegated team with 5 advanced experienced players playing in main. If their years of experience in advanced are worth anything, they should be able to win a lot of these games off of that alone. Unfortunately, although they are no slouches when it comes to aiming, there are definitely more explosive teams and talents in main this season that I can see Iron Man and his team struggling with. I'm a strong believer that the team who wants it more, assuming they put in the work, will find their way to win, and I feel as though Team Hyperrr, going up against players hungry for a taste of the advanced division they've been in for ages, are going to find themselves less safe than they may have thought in this lower division. Still, good enough for a deep playoff run though. At last, we've reached the top 10. Every team from here on out is a team I can see winning this season of main. Truthfully, there's very little separating them. Starting out with the 10th spot, however, we have SOREKARAagain. The roster previously known as Furenzoku Sonzai fell just 1 game short of making it advanced through the upper bracket, and then stumbled instantly in the lower bracket to find themselves back in main again. They happened to lose in decently close fashion against 2 eventual advanced sides in Carbonex and Conviction, but a loss is a loss in the end. This season, they've continued to call to arms 850, Lilia Amane, and Hiromi, while bringing in fresh blood in Tweaky and Vulcan, that is, the Vulcan that played Premier. On paper, this team easily has what it takes to make a top 8 run, but with a few early losses in this season, they're clearly not invincible. The question that stands for me is whether this team is actually practicing, so if someone has the answer to that, let me know. My player to watch here would be Vulcan, to see if he can show the value of his premier experience in a much lower division, as one of the most experienced players main Season 38 has to offer. Now on to one of the most exciting teams to watch rise through the ranks, the number 9 ranked team Cyberstorm. The highest ranked of all open move-ups on this list, Cyberstorm made it all the way to open quarterfinals before losing to Valen's roughly speaking squad. They then proceeded to take a quick visit to St. Louis Frag, where they managed to place top 4, although not having played too tough of competition on their way there. Regardless, this is a roster that's been putting in the work non-stop, with Austin leading the charge when it comes to frags, but a consistent team effort overall. While I do believe in this team and their ability to find success, I don't know how quickly that success will come. Depending on their route through the season, they could find themselves a top seed heading into playoffs. I'm eager to see them face off against some tougher competition, as although they've already won a legitimate 16-0 over the Ancient Animals, I want to see how they stack up against some more put-together teams. Their game next week versus Filthy Casuals should provide just the test we need to see where Cyberstorm really stands in Maine. All Gas No Breaks comes blitzing into the top 8 with a reinvigorated roster and many seasons of prep under their belt. This is a roster that I have felt should have found much more success last season, but just couldn't seem to put the pieces together for more than a 7-9 run. There's a genuine talent on this roster, but perhaps it took the addition of Nick Halden sidling into Roundcube's old spot on the team in order to see it activated. Febreze would definitely be my player to watch here, as he's found success in both winning IM in the past, as well as being part of a main team which had an incredibly deep run. Also sporting advanced experience, he's definitely the all gas guy's main source of fragging potential, but don't get it twisted, any player on this team is entirely capable of stepping up when needed. And with solid fundamental play out of Styx and Davd, as well as natural chemistry of the 3-man collegiate core, all gas no breaks finally seem to be ready to rise to their potential and make a deep run in main. Moving on to my personal dark horse of the season, we have the number 7 team of Stanleys Harem, formerly known as West Coast Pizza Rats. The former Rats are coming off the back of a 9-7 main season, but don't let that fool you, their ceiling is much higher than that. Their second season in a row as a full 5, third as a core 4, and fifth as a core 3, Stanley and his team definitely know the value of staying together and working hard. It is already evident in their 4-0 start to this season, with wins over teams in this top 48. Newest addition Jacoby is already sitting pretty at 180 R over the 4 matches, but this is another team where anyone is fully capable of stepping up and carrying if needed. Their team play is on point, they have a deep map pool and a deep strat book, and I will be shocked if these guys don't at least win playoff matches this season. In 6th place, we find Rectify Academy. Hello, Wadil. If you're hearing this, the video is finally out. I'm so sorry it took so long, and I hope it's been worth it so far. To discuss your team a bit, you found yourselves 2 lower bracket best of 3 shy of making advanced, taking a first round playoff loss to XLTG and a nail biting 30 round best of 3 against Carbonex to lose your chance at advanced. Okay, time to leave the second person commentary behind. Rectify Academy has since recruited experienced boomer MST to lead the pack, while keeping the other 4 players the same. Regardless of the close score of their first match against Emergence, the team finds themselves at an undefeated 3-0 scoreline to start the season, with a pretty decent early schedule. Snoob has been lights out for the team so far, with DJF definitely stepping up as well. Those 2 would be my players to watch for the team, but I expect DJF to continue to rise higher from here. Will Wadil and his academy team be able to rectify their past misfortune and claim a spot in Advanced Season 39? Let's find out. Putting your own team number 5. This is the cost of me making these videos. But for real though, Hebi and Yoko kinda nuts though. I don't know what the heck that was. Moving on. MTU takes the number 4 spot. I definitely have a soft spot for collegiate rosters, as I feel if you know the people you're playing with really well, hang out in person, and have the potential to develop through both ESEA and CSL, and meet in person to fix your issues, you're gonna go far. This is no exception for the Huskies. Led firmly by Voltage, but suffering the loss of Koi, a fundamental building block of the team, it's unknown at this point how hard the team will fall. I still believe that Voltage's overwhelming force in the server will be hard to deal with for any ill-prepared teams. Furthermore, much like with Peeker's advantage, playing with a player of Voltage or Davies' caliber elevates the players around them. Having such a resource as those 2 players allows for the less experienced players around them to learn and grow a lot quicker than normal. FTU is coming off the back of a most likely disappointing playoff run, running into the eventual runners-up of IM in UGK in just the 3rd round of playoffs. But with Maine secured, they had time to get back to the drawing board and figure themselves out for this season of Maine. Currently sitting at a 2-1 record, including a forfeit win, MTU won't have to play anyone too difficult until they face Valkyrie in September. Until then, MTU should be able to show us exactly where they stand with their new player, Chowds, and without Koi. In retrospect, 2 of these final 3 teams have definitely seen better days. We'll discuss Team 1 later, but Impossible Esports, my 3rd place team, are definitely off to a very shaky start, with almost every game going 29 or more rounds, whether they play good or bad teams. They're currently sitting at 3-2, with losses to Tracksuit Gaming and to Rated Gaming as well, in a very uncharacteristic, or so it seemed, set of losses. But it is very clear to me that despite their positive record, there's something wrong going on with the former 2-2 main playoffs team. I still believe in their ability to rise to their station as the number 3 team, but it may take some restructuring. If they manage not to lose themselves in that process, I wouldn't be surprised to still see them making advanced. But what was once a confident pick for me has definitely become less certain. Here's hoping Bonnie and Co. can find their footing. Since writing this script, Impossible have opted to bench Lake and pick up Beamer from Counter Nature's advanced roster. They've also managed to restabilize at a 4-2 record with easier teams coming up. Still, they have some work to do to prove worthy of this 3rd spot. In more retrospect, my number 2 team definitely looks like the team I expected them to coming into their first few matches of this season. If you haven't cracked the case by now, the team occupying the penultimate spot on my list is D-Man Esports Club. The 3rd season in a row for a core 4 of K9, Chung, Chippy, and Oaken, D-Man Esports Club enlists the help of former advanced player Razum to help them reach the heights they surely can this season. This team was the closest of almost any team in Maine to making advance last season, going 3-2 in playoffs and losing in a close 3 maps to Vicious Kitties to give up the advance spot. But Oaken and the rest of D-Man are more than determined to bounce back, with an incredible set of 4 wins against 4 teams on this top 48, including a 16-2 over Rynos Ranch. Despite Oaken's current top fragging performance for D-Man, I definitely believe that Razum has the pure aim to be worthy of the player to watch spot. This was blatantly clear in their first game against Conquest, where he dropped 110 ADR with 33 kills and a 35% headshot rate. He's gone seemingly more absent since then, but to be honest, the guys on D-Man really haven't been pushed all that hard yet, so he has done exactly how much he's needed to get the dub on the team page at the end of the night. I think this team is a definite contender for winning the entire division, and for the record, they would definitely be my favorite for this whole thing, if not for my number 1 team in the division. A lot has happened since I decided these guys were my number one pick for main. They hadn't even played a match yet at that point, but confidence was high across the board for at the very least a replication of their 3-2 playoff run last season, which unfortunately ended with them getting dominated by the eventual winners of main, MetaHash. If you haven't guessed it yet, my number one team for season 38 is none other than Kojomo's new home, Davenport University. They were looking like a fantastic pick to be the favorites this season, with the team's own players confidently boasting about their goal to win it all, and their confidence that they could do just that. Not to take anything away from Davenport, but thus far, I'm not as impressed as I'd hoped to be. Despite showing fantastic mental resilience to be able to come back 2 games in a row, I simply expect more from a team with this much potential and this much firepower on paper. They easily have a top 5 rifler in the division in Pug, who admittedly has been doing his best to help drag his team through some of these games, as well as a top 5 opper minimum in Kojomo, who has been farming the land circuit as of late to prepare for this season of main. Rounding out the star trio of Davenport is Arcade, who may not share the results of the previous two, but has solid advanced experience nonetheless. I'm very happy to see that Davenport has managed to bounce back from their startling 16-4 loss to Continuum, and I'm definitely not trying to undercut their impressive win over SOREKARAagain, who we already discussed has potential to win this whole thing, but I guess the hype surrounding them had reached a level where I expected more than maybe I should have, at least for now. I'll get into why I think Davenport University will eventually rise to the form that I expect them to in a moment, but first, I want to talk about their somewhat lackluster results as of late. It's possible that the team became overconfident, and when things started slipping away, they felt they should have been better, which may have compiled on itself. It's possible that they simply had first game jitters. There's just no way of knowing. I don't want to read too much into these early results, however, and in my opinion, Davenport definitely survived the stumble. They may have tripped, but they refused to fall. Looking towards the future, I believe this team will only get stronger with time, not only because they will continue to grow through their league matches as everyone else, or because of the added bonus I discussed with MTU of being a collegiate roster, but also because they have the facilities, support, and a literal team house for a few of the players. If a team with the resources and experience of DU don't manage to at least make top 4 this season, it would be a disappointment. And I definitely do believe in the longevity of this project, with Bebo, Slow Motion, and Agent, who all round out the remainder of the 6-man roster, having very little experience comparatively, but who demonstrate abilities beyond their experience. Davenport has the structural support, they have the voltage effect where the less experienced players can learn from the veterans, they have the IRL chemistry, and they have the superstars on paper. The only thing left for them to do is do it, and that's why I'm putting Davenport at number 1. With all of what I said being taken into account, I still believe that the theme of the season is how wide open everything is. We've already seen Davenport stumble hard. We've already seen the unranked TFDYJSTM roster with Cobra on it lose to Spooky Squad. Online CS is a finicky thing as is, and when you throw in the fact that this is NA, this shit's about to go wild. More than ever, I want to reconfirm that I have no clue how everything will pan out. All I do know is that there are a lot of hungry players staring down the 16 future advanced spots with salivating mouths and locked gazes. This is the best opportunity main teams have had in a while to break into the next echelon of play. Join me this season as we wait with bated breath to see who can take it all the way. Thank you all for watching this extended edition of the ESEA main preview. I'm sorry it took so long, I really am, but between college and my 9 to 5, in addition to practice and Denverland, I definitely found it harder to find time to do this, let alone doing it all alone as I typically do. Fortunately, I contracted the help of Tawa to help edit this thing, which was a huge help towards getting it out the door, so big thank you to him. I do hope in the end the result was worth it, at least as a token of my appreciation to the community. Just writing the script alone took around 10 hours, and I'm writing the script right now dreading how the editing will be for Tawa. But we'll do it anyway, because we love our community, and the NA scene I get to call home. And with that, I ask once again if anyone would like to support, please follow me on Twitter at Nova__FPS, and watch my run with Valkyrie as I continue to strive for my own goals of reaching the top. Thank you once again, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.